Hey guys, Reading Funk with you. And I want to come on for a moment and talk with you all about the Goodreads challenge that I did this year. I've completed it early. I actually completed it a few weeks ago, and I'm reading more books this year than I did last year. Last year, I set the challenge at 40 books, and I just barely made it. I read 38 books and two graphic novels that I counted, and I completed it just in time at the end of the year. This year, I've already completed 44 books, and I'm going to finish the 45th one, The Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice, probably today or tomorrow. Let me know down in the comments, guys, how your challenge is going. Let me know which book that you've read this year. Whether you're joining for the live stream or afterward, let me know the best book that you've read so far this year. I'm always looking for good book recommendations. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you guys have going on. I want to talk about some of the best books that I've read so far this year. I was going through and I see that I've rated some 5-star books in my list, and I want to talk about the Dresden Files. This is a series that I started earlier this year with the first installment, Stormfront, and I gave it a 5-star review. It's a series about a professional wizard, Chicago's only professional wizard. Harry Dresden is part of a series that merges fantasy and crime fiction. I didn't think it would work. I didn't think I would like it, but I'm hooked. I've read 3 books on it already this year, and I'm going to be going into the 4th book here before the end of this year, Summer Night. Summer Night will make it into my Goodreads challenge list for this year. I really like these things. The last one was Grave Peril, and I'm liking the direction that this series is going in, and I have a feeling that after all these years, now finally reading the Dresden Files, I think I'm going to read every one of them. I think this is going to be a regular thing for me until I finish all the books. The second installment was Full Moon, which I thought was pretty good. I gave it a 5-star rating, and Grave Peril may be my favorite in the series so far. I actually want to do a video where I talk about the Dresden Files and what's good about it, what I like, maybe some of the things that I dislike. But from what I understand, the series really evolves beyond what it starts as. And only having read 3 books so far in it, I don't think that I have a grasp on it well enough to do an explanatory video about why you should read it. So I'm going to read maybe 2 more books in the series before I go into that Dresden Files video. William, challenge was 37 books, currently at 36. It sounds like you are going to make it. I can't wait to set it for next year. I know Stephen King likes to read 60 books a year. I'm not sure if I can get that many in, but I might read 50 this year. I know the next one I'm going to be reading is going to be a lengthy read. The Angel of Darkness by Caleb Carr. It's a 750-page book. I'm going to audio and read the paperback. But yeah, that'll be my 46th. So, and I know I'm going to read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens before the end of the year. And that's going to be a quick read. That's going to be like a 1-day, maybe 2-day at the most. So I just might be able to get 50 books this year. I may have read more books this year than I've ever read in my life. Some other ones here that are standing out to me that are 5-star books. I read 4 Past Midnight by Stephen King as part of a group read. And man, it was good. It was a collection of 4 novellas. The Sundog, which is some Castle Rock history with Pop Merrill. Secret Window, Secret Garden. They made a movie on it with Johnny Depp. I think that's like the most celebrated story in the collection. I actually liked Sundog the best because of the whole Castle Rock thing. It's kind of like a prelude to Needful Things. The Library Policeman is in that collection, which is a very dark reader's read. It's all about books and what might happen to you if you don't return your library books on Time. And there's another story in the collection. I read it earlier this year. It's not immediately coming to mind, but I thought it was great. It's my favorite collection of 4 novellas by Stephen King is 4 Past Midnight, and I highly recommend that one. I may even go back and reread that one at some point in the future. The Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean Auel. I'm close enough to this one that I can grab it. Now, this was a good book. This is another one, like the Dresden Files. I thought about reading this for years, many years. And when I finally got to it, I was like, man, I shouldn't have waited this long to read this thing. This is a great book. I have 4 installments in the series now. I like this paperback, these matching paperbacks. I'm going to get the entire series in this paperback form. And these are pretty lengthy novels. This is kind of like an epic fantasy series, but it's prehistoric fiction rather than epic fantasy. I really like it. I like the story of Ayla and being in a group of Neanderthals. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. It's a really good book. I want to get to some of your comments here, guys. Feel free to leave me a comment, whether you're joining us live or afterward, and I will get to it. Lots of good books this year. Jack Carr, Savage Son, is probably my favorite. I'll have to check that one out on Goodreads. The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. You know, I've wanted to read Ruth Ware for some time now, and I actually own a couple of her books. Here's one right here, The Lying Game. And I've never read Ruth Ware. I've heard that she writes these good horror stories. I've got another one down there by her. I'm looking forward to her books. I know she, or at least I think she has like a psychological kind of horror. I forget the plot for the one I want to read. Something about going into the woods and some stuff happens. The lady can't remember what happened. It just sounds good to me, and I want to give Ruth Ware a try. Caitlin, challenge was at 28. I'm at 23, but reading Wheel of Time now and may not make it. Yeah, the Wheel of Time. You're reading this book right here. The Eye of the World. Here you can, I actually have it bookmarked how far I made it when I attempted to read this book. And I'm going to go back and read this whole series, but I made it 401 pages in this installment when I tried to read it. I recently bought the second installment in this series, The Great Hunt, because I know that I'm going to have a different expectation going into this. Again, I think that I just wasn't in the right frame of mind for this thing, and I gave up on it because I was a bit overwhelmed. Plus, I thought the plot wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but from what I understand, The Great Hunt, if you can get through the first 2 installments of this, you're really into the journey by that time. And I think I may really like this series overall, so I'm going to go back into The Eye of the World early next year. And I've got a project, guys, that I want to tell you about here. I'm excited for this. I'm going to do this. And what makes me think of it is the book that I just showed you. The Malazan Book of the Fallen series by Steven Erikson is an epic fantasy series. 10 primary books in this thing. And I want to go through these. And I already read book 1, by the way. I've got to go into Deadhouse Gates. But I think I'm actually going to go back and reread this one a second time before I go into Deadhouse Gates, and here's why. I want to do videos for this series, the entire series. I want to do chapter summary walkthroughs for each book, not only for this series, but for the Dark Tower series, where oftentimes when someone reads an epic fantasy series and they read a few books, a couple of years goes by, they want to read the next installment, but they can't clearly recall what happened in the previous books. And they don't want to go back and read those lengthy tomes just to get to the tome that they want to go into next. So it's nice if you can get someone to summarize a book for you, but not just to give you a general summary of the book, but to actually walk you summarizing each chapter through the entire book. That is a lot of fun. It's almost like someone telling you a watered down story or take on the book itself. And I want to do that for the entire Malazan Book of the Fallen series, where I literally walk you through each chapter, entire thing. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I really want to do it for the Dark Tower series as well, especially considering book 1 is such a brief read. I could easily read this in a few days. And I think what I'm going to do, instead of waiting till I finish the book and then going back, I'm actually going to sit down and summarize each chapter as I read it. I think it'll have a better flow if I do it that way. And I think that that will be something great if I can do that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun for me. And I think it can help a lot of people out there who want to recall the plot of a book so that they can read the sequel or the third one or wherever they're at without actually having to go back and read it themselves. Plus, when you read like a 1 or 2 page summary online on a book, you don't really get it like you would if someone told you, okay, in chapter 1, this is what happens. In chapter 2, this is what happens, and so on and so forth. I just think that that could be pretty successful, and I think it'd help a lot of people. So I want to do that. Let's see here. The Langoliers. Yes, the Langoliers. That was the other one in there. That's actually probably the most famous one, if not Windows Secret Garden, because they made movies on both those. Those were both hit movies. Hey, Ron Davis, thanks for the compliment. Yeah, 4 Past Midnight was a good collection. Caitlin, I'm in book 5. Try it again. The first one's rough, but it's fantastic, at least in my opinion. And that really says something, that I wasn't really enjoying the first book. I thought it started good, but I was halfway through it and I was like, man, this is a tome. I'm going to give up on it. I think with a change in perspective that I am going to enjoy it. And I know that if I can get through the first couple and I can start to grasp the magnitude of what's going on, I think I'll have a better appreciation for it. I think I'll enjoy it more. And I know that Brandon Sanderson, a new favorite author of mine, finished that series up on behalf of Robert Jordan. I read the first book in his Stormlight Archives, The Way of Kings, earlier this year, which is a book that's part of my Goodreads challenge this year. And because he authors that series, I'm really now attracted back into the Wheel of Time. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I've read a lot of great books this year. One I didn't like was The Eyes of Darkness by Dean Koontz. Holy moly, was that a bad book, in my opinion. I actually read it because it was in the media real big. People were saying that it predicted the coronavirus. So I thought, well, I better read this thing and get the real scoop and let my YouTube subscribers know what's going on with this thing. And I did not like the book. Man, that was a rough book. I did get through the whole audiobook, though, and I did my report on it. And then yet another report. You guys can check those out. Koontz did not predict the coronavirus in the book. There are some interesting correlations, though. But yeah, previous to that book, I actually read 2 back-to-back Dean Koontz. A 5-star book, Seize the Night. I really liked that one by Dean Koontz. It's the second book in the Christopher Snow trilogy, what should be a trilogy. We don't know if Koontz is ever going to finish it, but I had read Fear Nothing years ago, the first book in the Christopher Snow trilogy, and I did a reread on it, and then I went in to Seize the Night, and I think these books are great. If I've ever read anything by Dean Koontz that I didn't like, I think that is redeemed by how good the Christopher Snow books are. I read Odd Thomas, and I like Christopher Snow a lot more. I know people were split on that. I just like Snow. I like the mysteries that he's involved in. And Seize the Night really has a lot to do with time travel and all this weird supernatural stuff. I think that it worked out very well. And I hope that Dean Koontz does, in fact, finish that trilogy. The book Brainiac, Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan are my favorite authors. I'm a big fan of Sanderson. I've not yet read Jordan, other than when I gave up on the first Wheel of Time book, but I'll get back into it. I know the Wheel of Time is, many think, the pinnacle of epic fantasy. So if I'm going to get into epic fantasy as an avid fan, I have to get through that series, and I will. I'm on book 8 in the Wheel of Time right now. Just finished A Crown of Swords. Wow, you know, there's a paperback mart nearby here that has like every installment in the series for either $1 or $2 in paperback, and most of them are in pretty good shape. That's where I got my copies. Here's the second one. Let me get this out of here. Here's the second one, The Great Hunt. And it's a paperback that's in good shape for $2. I may buy the entire series off of that guy just to have them here. These are tomes, man. This is going to be such a huge story. I know it is. The only thing that I've completed that is like this is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. And even though it's probably a third of the size, if not a quarter of the size of The Wheel of Time, it's such a big story that it's an experience that you cannot have with like a standalone book or even a trilogy. You can't quite get that much depth and background and character relationships in like you can an epic fantasy series. So I think that this series could have a huge impact on me. So I'm looking forward to reading The Eye of the World and The Great Hunt and to review these books here on my channel. And I can't wait to read the Malazan Book of the Fallen series either. All right, I've read the first 5 books of the Dark Tower series a few years ago, and I was contemplating whether to reread them in order to finish the series. Chapter summaries will help me so much. Now, that's what I like to hear. That really encourages me to do that. The only thing that's like, I'm in the Dark Tower series. I've read the first 2 installments 3 times each, and I've only read the rest of the books just 1 time each. And I'd like to go into the 3rd book for my second read, The Wastelands. But I'm thinking, should I start my chapter summaries there and finish the series and then go back for the first 2 installments? Or should I chapter summaries by going back and reading The Gunslinger yet a 4th time? I'm not sure how I want to do that, but I haven't read a Dark Tower book since last year. Last year, I reread 1 and 2. I'm not sure what I want to do with that. I might start it all over again, especially because The Gunslinger is such a brief read. I could get that one accomplished pretty quick. And that would be a good test run on the chapter summary things, a shorter book like that. So yeah, I'll get those up here as soon as I'm in the mood for it. I actually have my Dark Tower shirt on now. This is Roland, the Gunslinger, going after the Dark Tower on an old NES cartridge type artwork here. I think this shirt's neat. I'd love to have this shirt with some different literary series. I think that would be cool. They might even have them. I'm not sure. I never finished The Wheel of Time. You and me both. I have not read the Dark Tower series yet. Okay, I'm not sure what that's about, but I really enjoyed the Sword of Truth series as well by Terry Goodkind. One of my favorite series of all time, actually. Do you do read-alongs? Be interested for the Malazan books. I actually do a lot of read-alongs. In Avid Readers Roundtable discussion group on Facebook, I do a lot of read-alongs, group reads. Almost every book, I manage to get a group of people. The Angel of Darkness by Caleb Carr. I'm going to be reading that as a group. We're starting here in a couple days. I've got to finish The Queen of the Damned up real quick so that I can make that on time. But if you're on Facebook, guys, if you're watching this on Facebook, and I know some of you are, come over to the YouTube platform and subscribe to my channel so that you can stay updated. Even if you don't feel like hanging out now, subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future. Look up Reading Funk on Facebook. A matter of fact, I'll drop the link for it, guys, in the comments here. And you guys can come on over and check out my YouTube platform and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Now, here's a book, guys, that I thought, this is probably the best book. Well, yeah, it probably is the best book that I've read this year. This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger, an author that I interviewed here on my channel. This is a very heartfelt drama. If I could recommend any book to you that I've read this year, I would recommend this Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. It's a very passionate, heartfelt, tear-jerking, dramatic, lovely book about some kids that escape from this horrible place where they have them, this like juvenile boarding school. It's called the Indian Training School for Native American kids. They're abused there. They're experiencing horrible life there. They get out of there. They go on this adventure. It's William Kent Kruger's version of the Huckleberry Finn and Mark Twain thing, where they're out in the wilderness on their own. This is his version of that. And it's just a brilliant book. It's such a brilliant book. If you read Where the Crawdads Sing and you liked it, you will highly likely enjoy this Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. So I'm surprised he's not, even though he's a best-selling author, I'm surprised more people aren't aware of him because of how damn good his books are. I also read Ordinary Grace by him this year. That's one book that went into my Goodreads challenge for this year, and I thought it was very, very good. Let me see what I rated Ordinary Grace. I gave it a 4-star. I liked it a lot. It was another drama. We're with a drum family in this one, back in like 1961 or 62 Minnesota. It's a drama. It's a lovely tale. It's just a very good characters that I empathized with, that I sympathized with. It was great. I love it. I love it. And William Kent Kruger is more well known for his mystery series that he does. The first book's called Iron Lake. I have not read that one yet, but Native Americans are a big theme for him. I think there's a Native American detective in this, in his Iron Lake series of books that are mysteries, but This Tender Land and Ordinary Grace are not part of that series. They're just dramas outside of it, and they're brilliant. They're lovely. I highly recommend them. I highly recommend them. The next one I'll mention here, guys, and I recommend this one. I give it a 5-star review. The Alienist by Caleb Carr. And they made a TV series out of this one. It's no wonder they made a television series. It's a great book. And the next book that I'll be reading is a sequel to it, The Angel of Darkness. The Alienist is all about this deranged child murderer back in the very late 1800s, 1896 Manhattan. He's going around killing people. So the alienist, or the psychiatrist, works with a team of detectives, police and non-police detectives, to try to catch this guy. He's the first person to ever put together a criminal profile on someone to try to understand who they are, to try to catch the guy, because no one can figure out who's committing all these horrible murders. It's like a sex fiend that's killing these kids. And it's a graphic and brutal novel, but it's an engrossing novel nonetheless. And I'm looking forward to the sequel, The Angel of Darkness. Caleb Carr is a great author, and I'd like more people to give this series a try because I thought it was just brilliant. Robin Loves Reading. Hello. Going through my Goodreads this year, Robin. I did more well this year. And I read some long books this year. I've read 44 so far. The Queen of the Damned will be the 5th one. A lengthy one that I finished this year was Nosferatu by Joe Hill. It's a massive book. I'm not sure if it's within reach here, but it's a mixture of fantasy and horror. Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. This is a great book about this evil vampire. It's a vampire novel, but the guy is named Charles Manx, and he is able to hop to different dimensions. And in this one dimension of space and time, he creates this place called Christmas Land. And he abducts children from different places, and he takes them there with him to live forever. And they don't age there. They stay children with Charles Manx. And it's a very inventive, very imaginative book by Joe Hill that I thought was quite good. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I read it earlier this year. It was my first Mark Twain novel. And I was very surprised by this thing. It read in such a way that I felt it was kind of like a modern read. It was dated, but in a way that just flowed. I thought it was good. It's an Arthurian tale, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. It's a satire. It's a sarcastic humor kind of thing. And I really liked it. It's the second Arthurian novel that I've ever read. And the other one was The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. And this one was just very good. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I want to read more Mark Twain because of this thing. And I think next year, not only will I really be focusing on epic fantasy and doing chapter summaries and reviews and trying to get author interviews for my channel. I'd love to review Sanderson. I'd love to review anyone that writes an epic fantasy series. Of course, I'm not going to be lucky enough to get Stephen King, but I'm going to be doing a lot with epic fantasy. But I want to read a lot of classics next year, too. I want to read The Count of Monte Cristo. I want to read Crime and Punishment. I want to read more Mark Twain. I want to read some Dickens and just a lot of stuff. I'm looking forward to A Christmas Carol by Dickens as well this year. It'll be one of the last books I read this year. Hopefully I can get 50 books in, but I think I'm going to like A Christmas Carol. I have some idea what the plot's about because I've probably seen movies, and it's a very pop culture book, but I want to read the book, and it's a kind of a brief one. So yeah, I think I'm really going to like that. And I want to read more Mark Twain next year. I'm a big fan of classics, and I also want to read the classic Rebecca, which I have a paperback of. This year, I got into the Revelation Space series by Alistair Reynolds. It's a series that I actually started years ago, and I tried to read the first book more than once. I couldn't get through it. I persevered earlier this year with a combination of the audiobook and the novel. And I've already finished the second installment in the series, Redemption Arc, which I'm going to review probably tomorrow. And I want to read Absolution Gap. I'm into this series by Alistair Reynolds. I highly recommend his Revelation Space books. I think they're very good. Although I gave Revelation Space 3 stars as a review, it took me a long time to get through it. It must have been like 4 attempts. When I was done with it, I had an appreciation for it, and I liked the second book better. I did not run out of gas with the second installment. It's a very interesting idea that Reynolds is working on in Revelation Space. Why don't we see evidence of extraterrestrials when we look out into the cosmos? Why don't we see evidence of spacefaring civilizations? Reynolds addresses that theme in his Revelation Space books, and I think that it's just very good. It's a very big idea. These books are very complex mechanically, neurologically. Consciousness is a big theme in his books, and he's brilliant. Engineering is a huge theme. I just like Reynolds. He's a former astronomer, and I recommend his Revelation Space. I passed my goal of 500, reading 583 now, hoping to end the year at 650. You know, there's a woman in the Courtney is her name. Courtney something or the other. She's already over 1,000 books this year. And I think she set it for like 1,300. She's ripping through some books. Next year, I want to do at least 50. I know I'm going to set it for at least 50, whether I make it or not. Megan, loved The Alienist. It was so well written. I'm excited for the sequel. That is going to be a lot of fun, the sequel. The Alienist was such a good book, and it was a historical piece as well. Caleb Carr actually lives there in Manhattan. And he did a lot of investigation, walking the streets of Manhattan and studying the history of Manhattan to get that setting right. And he did very good with the setting in that book. So I've heard some say that The Angel of Darkness is an even better book than The Alienist was. And I'm anxious myself to find out if that is true. I want to know. I want to know what that's about. The narrator changes. Stevie Taggart will be the narrator for the second one, and I think that that will be quite interesting. I know I'm going to like it. I might even do a chapter summaries on that book as my first experiment with doing that with a book in preparation for the epic fantasies that I want to do. I may walk you through The Alienist by Caleb Carr. Looking forward to it. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells is another classic that I read this year. Like the original science fiction novel, right? As far as what we consider science fiction to be today. The time traveler, traveling through time. He's an engineer. He's a scientist. He makes this machine that takes him to different points in time. This was a quick read. I thought it was a brilliant read. I laughed out loud while I read it. I did not expect this. I thought, okay, I'll probably appreciate the book by the time I finish it. I was into it the whole time. The Time Machine, I thought, was just very, very good. No wonder it's still a popular book, and they made a bunch of movies and everything. H.G. Wells, I now want to read his Invisible Man. I think I read it many years ago, but I can't be sure because I just can't really recall. There's like one scene in the book I think that I remember, but I'm just not sure. So I want to read that again. I want to read War of the Worlds. I think that I'll like that one. In fact, I know that I will. Been a ton of movies on that one. H.G. Wells was a very impactful writer, and I want to read a bunch of his books. The Time Machine was the first one that I read by him, and I want to read The Island of Dr. Moreau. I don't think that Wells wrote that one. Let me look that up. The Island of Dr. Moreau. The Island. I know I really liked the movie when I was a kid, but H.G. Wells, he did write it. And I'm going to read that next year. I know I liked the movie. It's a very interesting idea. H.G. Wells was just a brilliant. He was a literary genius, kind of like Arthur Conan Doyle. I consider Arthur Conan Doyle to be like at the maximum attainable skill level for an author with what he did with Sherlock Holmes. Like, you can't surpass that no matter what you come up with. It was that brilliant. And I liked The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I won't say it's the most brilliant thing I've ever read, but I thought it was very good. It exceeded my expectations. And wow, it actually seems like Wells has a series that The Island of Dr. Moreau is a part of. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I want to read more H.G. Wells in the future, and I will. I may read every damn book that he's actually put together. Let's see here. I'm not the biggest fan of Charles Dickens' writing style, although the stories themselves are beautiful. I don't know anything about Dickens other than knowing about some of the things that he's done. Of course, he's been a pop culture phenomenon as well. A Christmas Carol I'm looking forward to. I have a feeling that when I read that, kind of like with the Time Machine, I'm now kind of propelled into wanting to read more H.G. Wells. I think the same thing is going to happen with Dickens, and I have quite a few classics over there in my classics section that I want to read, including Les Miserables. But I don't think I'm going to go for Les Miserables until I finish The Count of Monte Cristo, which will be a book I'm going back for a second attempt. I gave up on it a couple of years ago. I made it almost 500 pages before I stopped. But yeah, Dickens is hard. I've heard that. I've heard that the language is dated, that it's slow, even painful. But I think that The Christmas Carol at least will not be. I want to read A Tale of Two Cities as well. That's a really famous one. Yeah, Reynolds is good. I highly recommend Reynolds. And if you want to read a Reynolds book and you're not committed to a whole series or trilogy or whatever, try Century Reign. Century Reign is a brilliant book. It's a 1959 noir detective novel where some detectives are trying to run a detective business. Two guys, two friends that are musicians. And that's one narrative, that's one part. And then the other part is this futuristic space opera where they're on a planet doing some excavations in the far future, really technologically advanced stuff, spacefaring civilizations, the whole space opera 9 yards, right? And a wormhole opens up between these two worlds, this 1950s noir detective and the futuristic. They come together. It's a very interesting and inventive book by Reynolds that you can read and enjoy without committing to a whole series. I really like Century Reign. I did a book review on that one, and it's one that I regularly recommend to people. I also read A Wrinkle in Time this year. It was the last book that I finished. I thought it was good. I have to review it soon. Madeleine L'Engle wrote that book. That's a phenomenon, A Wrinkle in Time. It's been around a long time. Disney did a big movie with that. I think that was pretty successful. A Wrinkle in Time actually, it reminds me of The Giver in the way that The Giver is part of a 4-book series. Many people don't realize that when they read The Giver. They finish it. They don't realize there's more to come. A Wrinkle in Time is part of a 5-book series, a quintet. So I don't know what those other books would be about, because I thought that although the conclusion in A Wrinkle in Time was kind of quick, but that it was satisfactory and that it wrapped things up. So I don't know what to expect next. It must be another adventure with Meg and Charles Wallace and Calvin. But yeah, I read Einstein's Dreams by Alan Lightman. I thought that that was a good book. And I must mention, friends, I'm really into some series this year. I've got the Dresden Files started. I've got the Revelation Space started. I also have the Sherlock Holmes novels started. I'm loving these things. I read A Study in Scarlet earlier this year. I was just blown away by it. I couldn't believe how good it was. I was totally engrossed the entire time. I actually had fun while I read that novel. It was very interesting. And I read The Sign of Four, the second book in the series. I will say that I guess I like To Study in Scarlet better, but The Sign of the Four was a very good book. And I'm looking forward to The Hound of the Baskervilles. From what I understand, of the 4 Sherlock Holmes canonical novels, The Hound of the Baskervilles is usually people's favorite that have read them all. It's about a dog. That's the only thing I know. Maybe there's a dog out ripping people to pieces. I'm not sure, but I want to know what happens next with Sherlock Holmes, because he has a serious drug addiction. He actually injects cocaine into his arm. His arm's all scarred up from these injections he does. He actually gets so high off of doing detective work that when he clears the case, he has this like bipolar crash where he's just miserable because he needs another case to take on, and he just can't take the pressure of not being on a case. So he uses cocaine intermittently with doing detective work to try to medicate himself for his non-detecting depression. So it's really interesting. I want to see what happens next with that in the next book. A Christmas Carol did not sound as dated as some other classics, and was very easy and enjoyable for me to get through. Hope you will like it too. I will like it, and I'm going to do a chapter summary on it, and I'm going to do my review on it, and I'm going to get someone else to come on and talk with me about it. The Queen of the Damned will be the next novel that I finished. I'm already working on the thumbnail for the review. I'm so looking forward to reviewing this book, but I also was like looking up reviews on it, and I came across a booktuber. She's got a real small channel, not very many subscribers, and I reached out to her. She recently reviewed The Queen of the Damned, and I'm going to have her come on. We're going to have a discussion about the book when I finish it up. I've done that. That'll be the third time that I have someone on for a discussion. I did a discussion on It by Stephen King with Alan Watruba. I did a discussion on Number of the Stars with a woman who came on my channel and talked with me about it. And I'm going to do it with Queen of the Damned. I want to do it for A Christmas Carol. I'm going to probably do it. Samantha came on and talked to me about The Way of Kings. I did it. The Queen of the Damned will be actually the fourth time I do that. But she might come back on and talk about The Angel of Darkness with me by Caleb Carr, because she's in a reading group that's reading the book with me. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I want to start bringing people on and talking with them about books. Of course, I read It by Stephen King this year. I was split on it. I gave it a 3-star review and a recommendation. If It Bleeds by Stephen King, I read, was not a big fan of it. I gave it a 3-star review. Thought about giving it a 2. I didn't like it. It was a collection of 4 novellas, and I liked 4 Past Midnight a whole heck of a lot better than I liked that one. I read Inferno by Dan Brown this year. I thought it was pretty good. I like Robert Langdon a lot, and I like the philosophical nature of the books that Robert Langdon is a part of, that Dan Brown writes. I'm going to be reading The Lost Symbol either before the end of the year or early next year. I want to read every Robert Langdon novel, and I've read The Da Vinci Code, I've read Origin, I've now read Inferno. So I've read 3 Robert Langdon adventures, and I want to read Angels and Demons. That's the first one. And I want to read The Lost Symbol. I think there are 5 Robert Langdons in total, and I'm looking forward to reading them all. Oh my goodness. Black House by Stephen King and Peter Straub. I read it earlier this year. Now that, my friends, was a tough read for me. That was a tough read for me. It was a real hard one. It was another book like Revelation Space that I actually, it was the 4th time I had attempted to read it. And I finally got through it, and I persevered for the Dark Tower connections. It's a cornerstone of the Dark Tower. The whole plot's about the Dark Tower. Yeah, I was not a big fan of Black House. Other than the tower elements, I thought it was just way too long. It's a tome, and it just took a long time to get a conclusion in that book. I read it in middle school. Scared the crap out of me. Just recently started King with his small novellas. Have a recommendation for a beginner. I like Misery. If you haven't read Misery, read it. Maybe the best book he's ever put together. It's a very fast-paced, suspenseful novel with just a horrific woman. She kidnaps her favorite author. Annie Wilkes kidnaps Paul Sheldon. If you're spoiled on the plot for that because you've seen the movie, I would recommend Doomakey or Under the Dome. Read Doomakey. That's a good one. There's no movie, so you haven't had the plot spoiled for you on that one. It's one of his least read and best books is Doomakey. I also read the 3rd installment in the Harry Potter series this year. Gave it a 5-star review, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. That's another series that I'm into that I've got to try to finish up here as soon as I can. I really like the Potter books. I was taken by these books. I didn't think that I would like the 1st installment, and I thought it was just brilliant. No wonder this one has blown up into being something extraordinary. It may be the most successful literary series in history, the Harry Potter series. I read it in middle school. Okay, I already got that one. I've done 22 books so far and counting, about 9 or 10 audiobooks. Do those count? My only 5-star so far is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. You know, I almost started American Gods by Neil Gaiman. There's a lot of mythology in that one, but I chose The Queen of the Damned instead. So I'm close to reading American Gods. Audiobooks do count. I oftentimes go back and forth. I'll read a couple chapters, listen to the audiobook, couple chapters. I like doing them both simultaneously as well. So the audiobooks do count for the Goodreads challenge. Hello to you. I picked up it when I was 13 in 2019. Great book, in my opinion. Yeah, that was one that I gave up on years ago, and I finally went back into reading it. And I really loved how there was a lot of revelation as far as the Stephen King universe in that one. Ton of good stuff about Derry, Maine. It's actually inspired me to write a short story on the origins of Derry, Maine, because Stephen King mentions how Derry, Maine got started, but he does not elaborate on it. And when Derry, Maine got settled, everyone disappeared after a while. They just vanished. 300 settlers vanished without a trace. And Stephen King doesn't say what happened, but we know Pennywise was involved. We're led to believe Pennywise was involved. And I am looking forward to writing a short story just to satisfy myself on what happened with that. So there was a lot that was great about it, and there was some that I wasn't as big a fan of on it. I also read Lisey's Story earlier this year, a romance novel by Stephen King. Many don't realize that he wrote a romance novel, but Lisey's story is a pretty good one, and there's a horrific element to it as well. I wasn't a fan of it to begin with. I actually stopped after 100 pages, chose to pick it back up, and then quite loved it after that. I thought it was a really good book. After the slow opening, I thought it really took off, and at some point in that book, it becomes very imaginative, and all this stuff starts happening that I did not see in the beginning. And that book was redeemed for me when I picked it back up. I thought it was very good. So yeah, it's been a successful year for me as far as reading goes. I've completed 44. I'm on my 45th. A Christmas Carol is going to be a quick read. I'm going to complete The Angel of Darkness. So that will be 47 there. I've got to read Absolution Gap by Alistair Reynolds. I want to read another vampire book. I'm so into this, The Queen of the Damned, that I almost just want to go right into The Tale of the Body Thief. I like these Vampire Chronicles books. I loved Interview with the Vampire. The second book, The Vampire Lestat, was kind of a slow read for me, but I'm back into it now with The Queen of the Damned. I want to know what happens next with these things. That's what I'm getting ready to do now, is have something to eat and then go back into The Queen of the Damned. I've got to get that finished up so I can review it here and do that conversation with that lady. She's going to come on. We're going to talk about it. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, talking with her about The Queen of the Damned and everything that happens in it, the explanation for how the vampires got their start. And we get a lot about the older vampires in this one. Louis, unfortunately, is not a big part of this one. Louis is my favorite vampire. His story starts the series off. The Interview with the Vampire is the vampire Lewis's story. And I want more of him. And I hope he comes into play more in the series as this series unfolds before my very eyes. But yeah, the ending of it wasn't very good. And that reminds me of Needful Things, where a great book and the ending just wasn't very good. It seemed like King didn't know how to end it, maybe, and he didn't know how to end Needful Things. He really got himself worked into this great story. Maybe he wasn't sure how to resolve it, and we got what we got with those. So yeah, but they were both good books nonetheless. But King has been criticized a lot about his endings. But of course, I felt that some of his books ended very good. Most of the endings by King I have liked, including the ending for Under the Dome, which many people disliked. They thought it was an abrupt, ridiculous ending that I actually thought was fitting, and I smiled while I read it. So, it just all depends on what you think about these endings. But in conclusion here, my friends, I have completed 44 books so far, set the goal at 40. I'm shooting for 50 now, and I'm probably going to set my goal for either 50 or 55 next year. Depends on this coronavirus thing too. How does this play out? I know a lot of people have had a lot of time to read this year, and they've read more than they normally would have. I don't know how it'll play out next year. but I'm going to read as many books as I can before the end of this year. I want to try to get to 50. Let me know down in the comments, guys, how many books you guys have read this year, and let me know which books you've read that have been the best. I will take note of those, as I always do. And I think I've said enough, guys. Thanks for dropping by, and I will see you all next time.